Welcome to my very first vlog of a race that I just completed recently. This was my 11th race ever, and I just want to describe my experience starting in crit racing this year and describe what it's like to try to begin crit racing and also describe a little bit about the techniques and kinds of strategy that I've used this season to have a little bit of success. So I'm going to give away the ending of this crit right here at the beginning. I won this particular race, and again, this was my 11th race. I'd gotten second in sea level crit about 4 times before this, including in my first crit. So, um, so I started with a little bit of success, but it took until the 11th race to actually win first place. And of course, among those 10 that preceded this, there were about 3 B-level races that were 3-4 races. So of course, those were a little bit difficult, and I did not podium in any of those races. So first off, I think there's a lot of intimidation about racing and getting started racing. How do you start racing? It took me a long time to decide to race and to just make that decision to jump in. It seemed like a huge barrier, both physically and mentally. But I always had my eye on it, and I think if you're probably listening to this, you've either started racing or you're considering racing. And there is a big jump to beginning racing. And so, getting second in my very first race indicates that I had a fair level of fitness before I had done any racing, and that's certainly the case. But the first thing I want to talk about is like what you actually need to do to even show up at the race and actually race. So one thing you need is a license. You need a USA Cycling license. You can buy an annual license. It costs about $70. You can buy that on the website, the USA Cycling website. Or you can show up to the venue if you don't want to pay $70. You can buy a one-day license that costs, I think, about $15. So that gives you a license to race for the day that you show up. And I also believe that if you decide to continue racing, that $15 can be applied to your $70 cost for you to buy the annual license. So you need a license. When you pay for the race, when you show up at the race, and this particular race costs $25 to show up and pay, they'll give you a number. You see the numbers on these guys, they're pinned onto the left side because the scorers and officials are on the left side of the course. And they need to be able to see those numbers when they record things. So it's pinned on the left side, safety pins and other kinds of means of attachment. You can look at a video on how to attach those. You want to keep them flat so that you're as aerodynamic as possible. You don't want that thing flapping around. Um, what else do you need? You need your license, you need your number. In this particular case, if you look on the front left fork of everyone racing, there's a little red device, and that's a timing chip. So in this particular series, a timing chip is required. You can buy your own timing chip, or you can rent a timing chip, and you can rent one from the venue there and rent it for the whole season. I paid about $50 or $60 for my timing chip, that I bought separately from the promoters of this series, and it's supposed to last about 4 years. This timing chip, so that's a particular new wrinkle this year to this crit series. That timing chip is required, and that helps them keep track of results, finishes, who's up a lap, who's down a lap, and that kind of thing. So that's the practicality. You got to show up. One thing about showing up at the crit is that you need to. It's a different kind of thing. It's different than your other group rides or your solo rides. You need to think in advance of what you're bringing to the crit. It's out of your routine probably. So you better plan in advance what it is that you need for the crit. Put it all together so that the last second you're not missing something, or you forgot your helmet, you forgot your shoes, you forgot your hydration, whatever it is. And there might be things you want to take off your bike, like maybe you don't need your saddle on the bike. Typically you should not race with the saddlebag. You'll notice that most people don't have lights on the back of their bike. That's just additional weight that you don't need. So that's a little bit about just kind of showing up at the race and what you need to do at the race. So another question you might have is, how fit or fast do I need to be to race? Well, a lot of people can have fitness. For example, triathletes can have good fitness. Maybe you do a lot of solo rides. You've developed some pretty good fitness. It doesn't require elite fitness to be in the group on this kind of ride. And actually, like any group ride, it can accommodate a lot of levels of fitness if you can stay in the draft. So you don't need the kind of fitness that will allow you to win this kind of race to actually race. However, it certainly helps to have some fitness. And one gauge of that you can determine is if you do group rides, is there anyone in your group ride that races? And if there is, you can talk to them. And if you're able to kind of keep up with them, that's an indication that maybe you can race. You know, there are some racers that are really dedicated to it. There are other guys that just do it once in a while. And you can talk to them and get their opinion. I got all kinds of opinions when I was asking this question when I was interested in racing. And, you know, one guy said, "You can, if you can ride around White Rock Lake at 22 or 21 miles an hour, you're ready to do this crit." Actually, a different crit in a different part of town, but same thing. You know, well, yeah, maybe. That's not really a great judge of things. You know, this particular crit has women, it has juniors, like 13-year-olds. It's got old people, it's got big people, it's got super in shape people, it's got out of shape people. All kinds are pretty much able to stay on in the group, at least for the first few laps, depending on what happens. But we'll talk more about the mechanics of what's going on in the race in a minute. Um, the most important thing about beginning crit racing, in my opinion, is your ability to handle your bike and your ability to feel comfortable in the pack. So you can see I'm in the pack here as you're watching the video, and if you're not used to being on wheels and being really close to people, it can be kind of scary. You need to have that experience before you start racing, if at all possible. Otherwise, you're going to be scared out of your mind. The first time I did a really competitive fast group ride, it's called the Pop Ride around here. It's called Pop A. There's an A ride, thus Pop A. And the first time I did it, I was scared. I was freaking out a little bit because I was riding much closer to guys than I had ever ridden before. You know, our bars are really close together. I had this sort of, force field in my head of how close I should be to another rider, and that was repeatedly being violated during that ride. And I just had to be used to being, within, instead of 4 feet from a rider, I needed to be within 2 feet of a rider, or our bars are right next to each other. And you'll find that if you do more competitive kinds of group rides with faster people, especially people that race, the proximity with which you're riding next to each other is closer and closer and closer. So that's the most important thing. If you cannot stay in the draft, if you cannot be on a wheel, if you're not comfortable with people moving up and down around you, you're really going to have a hard time in your first race. So here we go. This is what we call a preem lap. Uh, it's kind of something that um, gets the race going, especially if it's not been going and there's no breakaways. So the winner of this particular lap gets a $50 gift card. And so, one of the things you have to think about is, do I want to go for that preem lap? If I'm going to go for that win in the preem lap, I'm probably going to have to burn a match. More than one match potentially, and it may compromise my ability to place at the end of the race. Now, they announced before this race that it would be a $50 gift card for this particular preem, which is actually, in some cases, more than you might get for winning this particular C crit. This C crit is composed of Cat 4 and Cat 5 riders both together, and that includes juniors and some women. So it's the very bottom level of the crit racing. There's an A and a B and a C. This is the lowest level. So a $50 gift card is actually more than you might win for winning the race. Like sometimes it's like a $30 gift card for actually winning the race. And so, it's a kind of a big deal, this particular preem. And here we are about halfway through the lap. And I'm in position here where I'm deciding, well, I'm going to see how this plays out. Um, the wind is coming from the right side of the screen, blowing across. So the wind is from the south. So I'm not in a sheltered position here. And you can see everyone hugging the left side here. No one wants to give any shelter to other riders from the wind. And I'm moving up the field here. I'm going to see what's going to happen here. And I'm burning, a little bit of energy here, trying to move up in the field. And I'm pretty sure who my rivals are in this race. So one of them, my main rival that I had picked out before the race, is the guy right up there in the blue jersey, blue and the yellow bibs, right there as second wheel. He's fast. He's won this race a couple of times. I've not won the race prior to this, and so he's the guy that I've got my eye on. He's the guy that I'm marking. He's going for the preem. I'm right on his wheel right now. I'm in perfect position where I want to be, and we're headed to this little final bend. And I feel him weakening. I feel strong. I try to go to the inside. He moves to the inside. I get cut off. And once you're cut off, I couldn't regain my momentum and go any different direction. Um, at that moment, I thought that he had done wrong, and he had cut me off. However, when I reviewed it and talked to other people, it's clear that he was going across like in a racing line, going from the outside to the inside. It doesn't kind of feel much like a turn because it's more like a 30-degree turn. And so he didn't do anything wrong. But my lack of timing in trying to make my pass, where I was passing in a turn but didn't get there fast enough on the inside line, allowed. Well, that's what made me lose the preem rather. Prime. Did I say prime? Preem. Spelled prime, pronounced preem. And so he won that, and he's up the road now. So I'm stewing a little bit in my juices as I'm coming back to the group, and gonna shelter a little bit because I had to burn a match sprinting there, and we're about maybe a third of the way through the crit at this point, and I'm gonna burn some energy. So let's talk about the mechanics of the crit. Where should I be in terms of position? In your first crit or in any crit. So one of the pieces of advice I got was try to be in the top 10, especially if you have the fitness to do that. If you're in the top 10, you're less likely to be caught behind a crash, and you're more likely to be able to mark the moves that are going up the road. And um, you're just in better position. You're still sheltered, but you have more options, and it's safer. And safety is a huge factor inside a crit, especially if you're in a crit with not a lot of people. So, for example, here, I'm not in the top 10. I'm not in ideal position. I am sheltered, however. In this case, I'm to the left, and I'm trying to stay out of the wind. And um, I'm just biding my time here, recovering from the sprint that I had done the previous lap. So, if someone was marking me and thought that I was the biggest threat in this race, and they had saved energy and not gone for the preem, this would be a good time for them to attack, for them to go up the road, because I'm not in a position to mark them and go with them. And I'm certainly not going to want to, if I can help it, not lead the entire group up to the breakaway. So, um, so that's something to consider. So another thing to think about is breakaways. Should I be in a breakaway, or how should I handle a breakaway? You can see that the three riders here in front of me are on the same team in the light blue jersey. So it's helpful to have teammates because then you have more cards to play. You have strategy. You can have people do work for you, or you do work for people. In this case, I don't have any teammates in this ride, so there is no one doing any work for me. There's no one who's going to work to bring back a breakaway. There's no one who's going to lead me out in terms of a sprint. So my tactics are a little bit different. I want to, I want to win this. I want to be in play, and so I don't want to break away to get away, or I want to be in the breakaway. So in previous crits, I've been near the front at this part of the race, and if someone goes for a breakaway, I try to mark them. And usually, I don't try to be the first person that chases after the person who goes up the road. I try to be the second or third so that I'm sheltered as I'm accelerating and going up the road. So that's one thing to really consider in crit racing is your energy management. Your goal typically is to use as little energy as you can to go as fast as you can. So you want to pick your spots of where you use your energy. What are some ways to save energy? Well, one way is to stay in the group and stay sheltered. Even when you're in the pack, there are different places in the pack that are more sheltered than other places. So that depends on where the wind is coming from. Think of crosswinds. Do you want to be in the most sheltered place or the least sheltered place? If you're in the most sheltered place, you're going to save a lot of energy by being in that place. So constantly going around this track, I need to be thinking about what is the most sheltered place. Now, if you're treating this like a training thing where you want to burn as much energy as possible and get as much fitness done, like a training ride, that's different. You may be treating this not really as a race, but as fitness training. And so, get on the front, pull, try a breakaway, do other things. But if you're trying to win, you typically want to save your energy. Now, that may mean you go for a breakaway, but even in your breakaway, you're trying to go as fast as you can, spending as little energy as possible. So, in this point, I'm in a position that I like. I'm kind of behind a guy that's breaking the wind for me. I'm not spending a lot of energy. I've got my eye up the road. I'm not too worried about breakaways because there's plenty of time here that I don't think someone can, in this group, ride away from all of us. It takes a lot of energy to ride away from all of us. I've read and seen that they say people in these kinds of secrets, these Cat 5, Cat 4 crits, that breakaways are rarely successful. The first two crits of this series, secrets of this series earlier in the year, breakaways were successful on both of those races. And one of the reasons it was successful is because the strongest rider went off in a breakaway. So if the strongest guy is up the road, maybe he can get to the finish even by himself, and that's what happened in basically the first one. So the guy that won the first two crits is now a Cat 3. He went from Cat 4 to Cat 3, and he's actually does the A crit, and he's a very strong Cat 3. He's won several of the B crits. So that's one point here in these secrets. You have a wide array of different levels of fitness. You have guys that are going to eventually end up like Cat 2s. You have guys that don't nearly have that level of fitness, aren't going to even make it to the end. There's some guys that have probably gone off the back already by now. So you have a wide variety of different levels of fitness in this kind of races. People are moving up through the racing ranks. So we're actually going into a headwind now, and you can see maybe the pace is slow, a little bit slower when we're going into the headwind, and people are looking for a little bit more shelter. And the most sheltered spot is here on the inside, behind other guys in this group. Now, another thing to think about is, should I be in the middle of the group? That might be the most sheltered. Should I be more on the sides? Some advice that I've gotten from one of my teammates is that it may be advised to be more on the side. He compares being in the group in a crit to like playing Russian roulette. And the more people that are surrounding you, that are in front of you, where you don't have any options to escape or move, it's like putting more bullets in the revolver in terms of Russian roulette. If you are on the sides, you have a place to escape and move. So that's one thing to consider. It is more sheltered to be in the middle, but you are also in the position of potentially being more boxed in. You have which may have nothing to do with crashes, but may have to do with your ability to actually move up in the field when you need to move up. Say that there's a move off the front right now, and I'm boxed in. It may mean several seconds before I can move anywhere in the field and get out of there and try to challenge to move up or whatever. So I have to think about whether I'm boxed in or not. Um, so what typically happens in the crits, as far as my experience, is that they're going to speed up towards the end, especially in the last 3 laps. So a lot of people can stay together up until the last 3 laps, and then I think it starts to get strung out a little bit, and some of the weaker riders go by the wayside. Um, Especially the last lap requires a high level of fitness, even at this level of crit racing. So you're typically going to have to put out quite a bit of power in this last lap. We're not to the last lap yet. One thing to really think about is when is the last lap going to be? So in this kind of crit, it's not really a set distance, it's more a set amount of time. And it's not even actually a distinctly set amount of time, it's an approximate amount of time that the officials determine. So they'll usually announce definitely 3 laps to go, and most often 5 laps to go. They'll announce that there's 5 laps to go, and they'll have cards. First several races, I didn't even see the cards. I didn't know where the cards were. I wasn't sure how many laps were left. I was a little bit confused. I was in one particular crit in which I can't confirm this because I wasn't paying attention to the cards, but they said the cards went from 3 laps to go, they skipped 2 laps to go, and then put up 1 lap to go. So there were half the field thought there were 2 laps to go, and the other half realized there was 1 lap to go. And guess what? The people that knew there was 1 lap to go did a lot better than the people who thought there were 2 laps to go. So knowing how many laps you have left is critical to your strategy. So one thing that's particular to me is for this level of racing, my sprint is okay. Um, if you're a C race sprinter, doesn't mean that you're a sprinter per se. Doesn't mean that you'll be able to sprint at any higher level, but it just means that at the end, when you've got to put in a big effort, you have the ability to put in that big effort, and that's a huge weapon. So that means that I'm okay with this group staying together. I'm okay with there being no breakaway. I like my chances if the group stays together, and I'm willing to shelter and save my energy till that moment until which my energy is required. So again, we're here on this particular stretch of the crit. The wind is coming from the right side, so sweeping from the right side of the screen across to the left side of the screen. The further you are to the right, the more in the wind you are. We have these dips we have to go through. You have to control your bike through these. You have to worry about what other riders are doing. You don't want to cross wheels so that someone erratically veers left or right and you're in trouble. So that's another thing you have to worry about in terms of bike handling and positioning. And you want other people to know where you are so they don't suddenly veer out and cause you or someone else to crash. No particular sudden movements. If you're moving left or right, look around you, see who's there. And if you're going to be going up the field, let people know that you're moving. Announce where you are. So I didn't see. I saw the guy holding up on the left side. He was holding up how many laps to go, but I didn't actually see the number that he was holding up, and which kind of simulates the race, where if you're not closely paying attention, you might not see what the number is. So at some point here, there's going to be an attack up. Yep, there is a guy off the front. You can barely see him up there. He's I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 seconds off the front. And so there's a guy up the road. There's a guy who's throwing it down, putting in a time trial, wants to win this race, and he's off the front. And so you know, breakaways they say are less successful in C crits or Cat 4-5 crits, and they say that's because there's not really a lot of team strategy, and almost everyone is willing to chase down a breakaway. Certainly, it's been the case in this particular series that the C-Crit has had much fewer in the way of breakaway wins than the B-Crit, where it seems almost every week there's a breakaway win. So in the B-Crits, you'll typically finally get a group off that's composed of many of the folks that are in represented teams are represented, and then everyone else on the team is not interested in chasing down the crit. In fact, may block chasing by disrupting the flow of the group. So in that case, you may only have a few people willing to chase, and by golly, there goes the breakaway, and they're going to be successful most likely. However, in a sea-level crit, it's a little less likely that a breakaway is typically going to win because there are more people who are going to hunt that guy down and not let it be successful. So you can see him right there on the far left of the screen, got a little bit of a gap. Now, maybe I have enough energy that I could bridge up to him if I wanted to. Not sure. I wasn't even considering it, but I would have to think, is that how I want to burn my matches? Is that going to be successful? Can I hold out for that long? We have about 7.5 more minutes of racing to go. Um, am I going to be able to, with one other person who knows how strong he is, if he's going to last, am I going to be able to hold on for that long? Let's see if I can see the number there. Yeah, okay, I think it said 3 laps. So we have 3 laps to go. This is really where the race basically is starting. 3 laps to go. One guy up the road, um, and on the right side, on the far right there, with the blue jersey and the yellow bibs, Sun and Ski. That's the guy that I'm keeping my eye on. Nice guy. Uh, really respect him. And so, over time, you get to know who the major threats are in the series, who's had a history of winning, who's fast. And, if you have the fitness, you might even mark someone like that and say, that's what I did in my first race. I was like, this guy's strong. This guy's won before. He's done well in this series last year. If I'm somewhere around this guy, I'm probably going to be okay. I can emulate his strategy, stay on his wheel. And so there he is, blue jersey in the front, going to the front, and he's putting in a little work, uh, going after the guy up the front. He senses that the group doesn't want to work. He's willing to do a little bit of work to try to bring this guy back. You might ask, why am I not up there doing work? Well, that's one of the things. Whenever you're racing, you will hope that somebody else will do the work so you don't have to do the work. This isn't a contest of who can do the most work. This is a contest of who can get to the finish line the first. And so, if at all possible, I can get away with not doing work. That's going to bode well for me having more energy at the end. So I am here, I'm marking the front. I'm at the front of the race. I'm no longer at the back. I'm no longer biding my time. I want to keep an eye on what's going on here because any move that any move from here on could be a winning move, and I need to keep my eye on things. So throughout this race, there were some people that jumped off the front with little attacks, and um, most of them didn't go very far. And that's one thing you've got. If I had tried to chase down every one of those, I'd have burned all my matches and would not have done well. So I've had other races where I spent a lot more energy chasing, and I'm not chasing here. I'm in the ideal spot here for me, out of the wind. Again, the wind's here blowing from the left to the right, so I'm out of the wind. I am just resting and saving my energy. So I think at this point we have 2 laps left. And so, this is what happens in a crit. Suddenly it pauses. The whole group pauses. Like the guy in the front's like, I'm chasing, I'm done. Somebody else go to the front. I'm not going to just sit here and pull. There's a guy going off the front, and it's sort of like a game of chicken. Of are we going to let this guy win, who's off the front? We can easily pull him back if we work together. We just let this guy win, or are we going to do some work here, work together, and pull this guy back? And if we're going to do some work, who is going to do the work? And that's the question. Who is going to do the work? Who's going to get on the front, get into the wind, pull this guy back, and potentially sacrifice their own chance of winning? So it's easier if you have a team. So here's a big dig. I'm going up above 500 watts, 400 watts. I've got to put in, a little bit of energy here to stay on this wheel. I'm not going to stay in the back. I don't want a gap to open. I'm not letting any gaps open. I am tr- I am conserving my energy by staying as close to wheels as I can. And um, again, energy management is the most important part of this. Every little piece of energy is important. If you're the strongest guy in the race, you can afford to burn some matches. And see, again, we're slowing down here. I don't want to be in the front, but it's going so slow that I'm just I don't want to break either. So I just find myself at the front. There goes the guy on my left. A little bit of an attack here. And watch closely on the right side. Watch closely on the right side here. Look what happens. I get moved over by the guy on the left in the red, and then I get passed by the young guy in the neon green yellow jersey, and he actually went through like the gravel and grass to pass me on the right side. So this is about a lap and a half left. He's making his move. He's making his attack. He's like, group is slowed down. Now is my opportunity to put in an effort, and this is his all-out effort to win the race. So now we have one guy up the road with the guy in the yellow there, neon yellow, chasing after him. And then we have these 2 guys in front of me. So again, it's kind of a game of chicken. Who's going to do the work to bring back these 2 guys on the front? Um, we have enough time, we can bring them back. But who's going to do it? And how patient should you be? I think sometimes a little bit of this racing is like, um, you know, are you willing? Sometimes you have to be willing to lose to win. So if you're going to win the group sprint, you have to be willing potentially to let the breakaway win. You can't be both the breakaway guy and the sprint guy, and you can't operate in every single role that a cycling team would have. You can't be the domestique, the sprinter, the breakaway specialist, and everything. So if you go to the front and do a big pull, that's it. You may not have anything left to be able to compete in the sprint. So the guy that I've been marking the whole time, he goes to the front. Now he's putting in a big effort, and he recognizes the danger, and he's like, I'm just taking the bull by the horns. I'm going to try to get on those guys. I don't know if he's trying to gap the field. Certainly, he's putting in a big effort. And the guy in front of me here, a friend of mine, I'm on his wheel, and he really, in my opinion, needs to get on that wheel if he can, right in front of him. He's not on the wheel. So he is burning energy off the wheel. If he can get to the wheel as quickly as possible, he'll save energy. So I'm not sure why, but the guy I've been marking, you can see that he put in that effort, and he's just drifting off to the right. I don't know if he had a mechanical or some other issue. So I'm desperately hoping that my buddy here is going to get up to these 2 guys on their wheel. I sense he's weakening. He's been up there a long time. He's burned a lot of energy. Now's the time to make my move. So I put in like was that a 500, 600, approaching 600 watt effort. Did I make a big enough jump that I've gapped the people behind me? I'm not sure. I wasn't looking back, but that's one thing that you need to do. You need to break the elastic. I passed the guy that was off the front for a long time. One more guy to go to catch up. Now I don't know if there's anyone behind me. I have the sense that there isn't, but I'm not sure. If I take in a quick glance, I might know. Do I pass on the left and get boxed in like before? No, this time I pass on the outside. So we're approaching the finish, and here we are. Right up there ahead of me, you want to put in is go all the way to the end. I got clipped on the line before, not for first place, but for a different place. Go all the way to the end, and that's it. First place crit.